I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Good news, everyone! We're talking about Futurama today. Isn't that lovely, Kiki?
Hey, Tuesday, I've been thinking about starting my own podcast with blackjack and hookers. Actually, forget the podcast.
Yes, we are finally talking about Futurama, something that we have wanted to talk about for so long, and that for, we were going to talk about it before, and then, oh, hey, there's the reboots coming. Let's hold off on it. And then we forgot about it. And, oh, yeah, we were going to do a Futurama episode, weren't we? Yeah, we were. And now, as the new season is coming.
I think just within days of this release.
Season 11.
Well, depending on how you count it, the seasons of Futurama, as any true fan will know, numbered a little weirdly because it's been split up sometimes. The episode orders have been split after production. It has traveled across 3 different production companies now. Yeah. The seasons you will find start off kind of normal, and then after it starts bouncing around, they get into season 6A and 6B and all this kind of stuff.
Like there was that time there was like, oh yeah, the show's not coming back. Let's make a few direct-to-video movies. Oh, we're going to cut them up and that's going to be a season.
Yeah.
And, so it's officially listed as season 11. If you want to go into a box that leads you into another universe or something, or press a button that freezes time, or, use a time machine, or any number of sci-fi gadgets the show has used.
Yeah. The other thing is that I do want to do one specific shout out, because this episode was sort of requested by my best friend since I was a little tiny ferret. So Dustin, this one's for you, and thanks for making the request.
Thanks for reminding us we were supposed to do this.
Yeah. I asked him if he had any requests, and he said, "You've done Futurama already, right?" And I went, "Oh, crap, we haven't."
We had at one point we had like a really big guest star, and that fell through, and it never happened. It still might happen in the future, so I'm not gonna poo-poo on that.
Yeah, no. Sometimes timing doesn't work out.
Yeah,
but we, I think it is not amiss to say, are both massive Futurama fans.
I remember when they announced this, because I was, this was still during, prime Simpsons. And Matt Groening, he's leaving the writing team of The Simpsons. He's going to move on and do a new show. And then this is the follow-up. This is the guy that did The Simpsons is doing a new show. What's he going to come up with? What's this all going to be about? And then we hear, Futurama. It's going to take place in the future. And it's like, okay, this is interesting. It's going to be a lot of sci-fi stuff. And yeah, it is a lot of sci-fi stuff because it is the future. There's a lot of space travel, but a lot of the episodes have heart in, real world stuff. There's real world situations just hyped up because it happens to be in the future, or real world political commentary that is just fantasized because it's in space or in the future, stuff like that.
Yeah. The thing about it is, of course, we have been watching this since, day one, and this one came out in 1999, kind of early in the year, and it was one of theirs that they did kind of over the summer months. Instead of starting with a fall broadcast, they started with a spring broadcast, and it kind of took them through the summer months, which was kind of a soft launch, I think of it, rather than trying to throw it into the real hubbub of the fall TV schedule. I think it might have done the show a little bit better because they went for a spring broadcast instead of premiering it in the fall.
Not a lot of competition, so you get more eyes on it. I mean, The Simpsons would already either be close to or already on their break by the time the Futurama was really hitting on their cylinders.
Yeah. And it was still, 99 was still when Fox was at the peak of their, they'd later call it animation domination. It isn't named that, I don't think, in 99 yet. I think that was a little bit later that they started calling it animation domination. But the zeitgeist had already kind of considered that, Fox is the place you go for primetime cartoons.
So at this point, you had The Simpsons, you had King of the Hill, you had Family Guy just getting started. A show that is referenced in Futurama, in the early episodes of Futurama, show called The PJs.
Yeah, which did not last as long as Futurama.
That is always a funny thing when you go with early Simpsons and they're referencing shows that are just no longer on the air or never made it. I mean, Family Guy did an entire opening sketch of here are all the great shows on Fox, and if they all get canceled, they'll bring us back.
Yeah. And let's go ahead and just talk about that before we get into the actual specific episodes we're going to talk about today, because this was one of those that it ran for 4 seasons originally on Fox. So it ran until 2004. The thing is that I didn't realize for the longest time that it had gotten canceled. So I think the first time that I saw The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, which is the final episode of the original run, I watched it and I was like, man, if they wanted to use that as a finale, they could have, but I can't wait to see what they do next. And then it was like, yeah, it's going to be a few years.
And then the show gets picked up by Comedy Central for reruns, and the show gets amazing ratings in reruns to the point that maybe there's something here. It's very similar to Family Guy. When Family Guy got canceled, it was the reruns on Adult Swim that brought the show back.
Yeah. And actually, they did do Futurama on Adult Swim for a little bit too. But it was such a big ratings blockbuster, and it got so many new eyeballs on it that hadn't seen on Fox, that in just 2 years, I really thought it had taken longer, because to me, it felt like forever, that first dry spell. They canceled Futurama. Oh, now they're bringing it back. But it was just 2006 that they were going to bring it back for a movie.
Yeah, it was a movie, and it was Bender's Big Score. And Bender's Big Score did enough, okay, let's do another movie. The Beast with a Billion Backs. All right, let's do another one, Bender's Game. And then again with Into the Wild Green Yonder. And those movies did enough that Comedy Central saying, okay, let's bring this back.
Yeah. And the thing is that they really thought that the DVD movies were this was our big break, okay? And so if you watch Into the Wild Green Yonder, it does kind of end in almost a second finale. If you'd have stopped the series after Into the Wild Green Yonder, once again, you kind of feel like it comes to a close. But then they bring it back for what would be season 6. If you count all the movies together, that's usually what's counted as season 5, and later they were split up. Each movie was split into like 4 parts so that they could be released individually as TV episodes. And then you get the proper revival on Comedy Central starting with season 6 in 2010.
And my favorite thing, and it does continue into the Hulu era, where one era ends, they make sure, like, we're not sure how to continue after this part. Yeah, we'll just, we'll resolve the cliffhanger in the first minute of the episode, and we'll just move on like nothing happened.
Yeah, so Comedy Central started with an episode called Rebirth, which was basically literally kind of them rebooting the series. In the fact that, like, there's a whole plot about, like, all the characters being reformed entirely and stuff from scratch. It's a wild episode. But season 6, which was like 6A, 6B, and then season 7, which was 7A and 7B, they get aired on Comedy Central, and that ends in 2013 with yet another ending episode, basically.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, which is a lot of people's favorite episode.
yeah,
It's one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah. So that may come up later in this episode. Ooh. But as soon as the cancellation from Comedy Central was announced, Matt Groening was already telling people, like, okay, try not to freak out too bad because I still have the option to shop it around. So if we can find another network or another outlet or anything, we will bring it back in some form. Well,
10 years later.
Yeah, 2022, now that Fox had been wholly subsumed by the Disney behemoth, Hulu decided that they would pick up 20 episodes, meaning 2 seasons, 10 episodes a season, that they would premiere starting in 2020.
And this was Hulu picking up a lot of original shows. We've talked about one on this show, Solar Opposites. But then you also have shows like there was the Marvel shows. There were the Marvel shows. There were a bunch of other shows that Hulu had picked up just before the Disney merger to kind of compete with Netflix. This was also a pre-Disney Plus era.
This was also around the time that Hulu had picked up things like Animaniacs to do another season of, you know?
Yeah, all your millennial favorites in one place.
So they were picking up what they could of back catalogs, and then they were rebooting several things, including a lot of brand new animation. And it was a very, very interesting time for Hulu. And even though that original 20 episode run ended in 2023, they said before then, like, okay, we're not promising next year, of course, but we are in talks to develop future seasons. And so now, just within days of this episode dropping, we're going to get season 11.
Yeah, 10 more episodes, and yeah, and it's done well for Hulu. And it's one of those things that Futurama is just that show. It has its fan base, and it's a very loyal fan base. Not a fan base that can sustain a show on network television, but honestly, a fan base that can sustain a show on streaming services.
A rabid enough fan base that they will follow this show to wherever the hell it might end up next, which sometimes is even more important. The thing is that, I'm just going to put out the normal disclaimer. We are going to be talking about, like, spoilers all through the run. So if you're new to Futurama and anything we've said is kind of, intriguing to you, stop now, go over to Hulu, Disney Plus, wherever in your country, and all of the back episodes of Futurama are on there. So go enjoy yourself and then come back. But specifically in this episode, we're not going to start with the pilot episode, which is called Space Pilot 3000, but we're going to start with what was the second episode aired, which is called The Series Has Landed, because it's the first episode where we get basically all of our main important characters.
And you kind of get the format of what the show is going to be going forward. Those first 4 episodes, honestly, and I say this the first 4 episodes, because some have said 3, but I say 4. Those first 4 episodes could just be a 4-part episode in itself, because those 4 episodes set up the entire series. The first episode, again, it brings Fry into the future. The second episode introduces Planet Express and all the side characters. The third episode brings Fry and Bender as roommates, and the 4th episode introduces a character that would become very important in the entire series, Nibbler.
Or did it introduce him? Bum bum.
Because that's what I wanted to get into. Right, we'll get into Series Is Landing in a minute. Nibbler has become such an important character in the show that no spoilers for this, but when we finally find out the truth about Nibbler, there was a lot of people wondering, wait a minute, because we flash back into that first episode. What's going on here? And when people by this point, Futurama is already streaming on the Comedy Central website, I believe. So we go back and Nibbler's in the first episode? Was this going back? And by this point, the season box sets had started coming out. So a lot of people were wondering, did they just edit the first episode to put Nibbler in that episode? Because South Park has done this. South Park has, they've completely reanimated a lot of their original episodes, often putting some gags in from later episodes to kind of flow the continuity. So is that what the Futurama team did? And it took many, many, many years of trying to find out if this is the truth or not. And I don't know. I forget the guy's name that did it.
I got it.
Go ahead.
Just a year ago, as of time of this recording, a YouTuber that goes by the name Sceneometry put out a video called Futurama's Oldest Mystery Solved. And what he was able to find was a screener VHS that had been sent to a Fox affiliate network to let them see the pilot and show it to local critics and promote the show, that they could take clips from it, make their own commercials, things like that, which was a lot more common in 1999. So they had sent the screener just with that, 24, 25 minute episode, and all completely unedited, ready for broadcast. And he was able to prove that it was the original episode in original airing, because one of the things the fans knew is that they had to re-edit and revoice part of the episode, because there was a joke that right after the episode aired became very unfortunate because of the death of a famous figure. And a lot of people, I know I did, I assume you probably did too, that watched it in the original run. We remembered that joke, but by the time they put it out on VHS and DVD and put it into reruns, it had to have been changed. And his copy still has the original jokes that had been changed, and he was able to go through and show that Nibbler's shadow was in fact seen in the original pilot episode before the series had even been properly picked up. So shout out to Sceneometry. That was some amazing detective work. It's an amazing video. If you are a real Futurama fan and you've never seen him go through the entire process. Go look him up on YouTube. It is a wonderful video. And the fandom thanks you, sir. Salute.
Yeah, and it shows how much planning. I don't know if they intended that to be Nibbler at the beginning, but that's what it ended up being. And, it shows that they had some ideas of where they wanted this show to go.
Yeah, and we will talk about several things during the course of the episodes we get into more, how little things from them have come back and shaped the series. But that was one we really wanted to give a shout out to, and shout out to the writers. If you aren't that familiar with the show and you really, don't want to go watch, it's just about a guy from 1999 who on New Year's Eve 1999 gets a pizza delivery call, because he is in fact a pizza delivery boy.
I'm a delivery boy!
Yeah. So Fry is a pizza delivery boy. He goes to deliver a pizza to a cryogenics bank, and he ends up falling out of a chair and ending up in a tube, a cryo tube, and getting frozen for 1,000 years. And then he wakes up December 31st, 2999, just before the year turns over. And the big kicker of the opening is him realizing everyone he knew in his past life is now dead and gone. And then, woohoo!
Yeah, he kind of had a really terrible life. Like he said, he hated his job. He hated his life.
His girlfriend had just left him for Pauly Shore.
He had a really antagonistic relationship with his older brother. We'll get to it.
Yeah. His boss treated him like crap. His job was going nowhere. He wasn't smart enough to really advance or do anything that he wanted to do. So he sees this as, all right, I'm in this great utopian future. Like, there's robots walking around. Fry is introduced as a big sci-fi nerd. And so all of a sudden, the fact that he's in a future that has spaceships and robots and stuff, he's just overjoyed. And then he discovers that the future is in many ways the same as the Earth he came from. And everybody is scanned to figure out what they are best at. And then they are given a career chip. And if you don't accept the career chip and accept the career path that the government tells you, you are fired out of a cannon into the sun.
Yeah.
Which is a line I use all the time. You've probably heard me use it on the podcast. But he is then like just truly depressed because, like, I don't want to be a delivery boy, which is what the government says he'd be best at and is going to mark him forever. Until he discovers at the end of the episode that his one living descendant, his great whatever grandson or grandnephew, excuse me, is actually runs a delivery company that delivers things via spaceship. And then he's like, all right, I'm a delivery boy. Cool. That brings us to the series has landed right there in kind of the short version of it.
Philip J. Fry, played by the amazing Billy West, who at this point was probably best well known for being the voice of Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah. Before this, that was his big thing. Yeah.
Also, I believe at this point, this is 99, he would have already played Bugs in Space Jam.
Yeah, he would have as well. But he plays Fry and Farnsworth and also Zoidberg. I
love how Billy West is pretty much responsible for half the memes of this show.
Yeah, easily they come from his characters.
Like, shut up and take my money. I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Your idea is bad and you should feel bad.
Yeah.
That meme, I was reminded of another meme from the show when I was watching, like, just, some social media video, and the person in the video said, and it's always good to remember that everyone you meet is trying their best. And immediately Bender in my brain went, your best is an idiot. because that's always been one of my favorite memeable quotes.
John DiMaggio as Bender. Yeah, there was some controversy going into the Hulu era that John DiMaggio may not have come back as Bender because pay dispute. Pay your artists, pay your voice actors.
Yeah, but eventually they ponied up the cash and Bender is back, baby.
My favorite thing is that they occasionally will make reference to the fact that John DiMaggio is on other shows. Like there's an episode that references the fact that he is he's
Jake
Jake
the
on
dog.
Jake the dog on Adventure Time. Yeah.
Yeah, and
What
there's
time is
lots of
it?
little jokes like that. Yeah.
Yeah. What time is it? Time for you to shut up.
Yeah. We've also got rounding out kind of the main cast that gets introduced in this episode. We've got the amazing Katie Seagal as Leela.
We've talked to her previously. Again, if you are a Fox viewer back in the early 1980s, you knew her as Peg Bundy on Married with Children. But as we established in an earlier episode, Kiki, you did not grow up with Married with Children.
No, it was considered naughty, naughty viewing in my household when I was a child.
So this was like the big roles that you knew Katie Seagal from.
Yeah, I mean, I had seen her in other, like, she did a lot of kids' movies and stuff in the 90s and everything. So I'd seen her on other things, but this is kind of when I hear her voice, I think of this. When I see her face, I think of her character on Sons of Anarchy. That's kind of those are the two. So it's kind of weird, that's where my brain goes with it.
She doesn't change her voice at all, but it's just the way she presents. We've talked about this, voice actors with only one voice, but she makes it work so because how she performs as Leela is very different than how she would perform as Peg Bundy or as any other character you might know her as.
Yeah, Peg Bundy actually has much more of a character voice than Leela does. And you can tell it in the episode where they reference the fact that she was Peg Bundy. Because there's an entire episode where, Leela ends up in a relationship with a guy and he ends up being, you know,
Al
he's
Bundy.
he's Al Bundy. And they even call him like Alcazar or something like that, I think was the name they gave him. So she's able to call him Al at one point, and he kind of tarts her up like Peg Bundy used to be tarted up, and it's a great episode. But the uh, the thing is that if you watch a lot of her now, and then you go back and listen to what she's doing with Leela now, it's very obvious that her Leela voice is a peppier, younger kind of version of her voice. She kind of raises the register a little bit and everything, which is basically the same thing that Billy West has always done for Fry. Fry is one of the few characters that he's not really putting a character voice on. He's just doing what Billy West sounded like at 20 to 30 years old. The thing with, Bender is it's obvious if you know anything about John DiMaggio's, work history. It's obvious that's him, but it is very much a character voice. We've got a couple of other animation greats. We got Phil LaMarr playing Hermes Conrad, who runs the thing, and it's Phil LaMarr with a Jamaican accent. It's a broad Jamaican accent, but apparently he had originally been using like a stereotypical nerd voice for Hermes when they were first kind of, going through and trying to record the early episodes, and it was not working, and they were trying to figure out some way to do it. And for some reason, just in the booth trying to figure out like how do I make this character work, he came up with a Jamaican accent and started doing it in the booth, and they were like, actually that's really good. And that led to one of people's favorite episodes of the series, how Hermes requisitioned his groove back. So that was a good choice there. Good choice, Phil.
Yeah. Legendary voice actor Phil Lamar. He's Green Lantern. He's Static. He's a lot.
Yeah. And then we round out the kind of main cast with Lauren Tom playing Amy Wong and also Mrs. Wong, her mother. And we've talked about Lauren Tom before because we just did King of the Hill. And of course, she's a big part on King of the Hill playing Connie and Min Home. And since we already mentioned Nibbler, Frank Welker. Frank Welker, he is your childhood. Love him.
Both the baby / animal noises and just when he actually starts talking.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's really awesome there. And I think, when was the last time we talked about Frank Welker? It was all the way back in 2 episodes ago when we did Transformers.
Yeah.
Frank Welker is everywhere at all times.
And we are going to be talking about this character later, and I'll throw him in there. Another great voice actor, Maurice LaMarche. He plays Kip. He plays Morbo.
Yeah, and in this episode we're talking about here, he plays Mr. Horrible Gelatinous Blob in the Planet Express ad. If people didn't know that one, since it's not a character that pops up much. This is not the only time we see HG Blob, but he's not like a constant character. But he is the lead in the Planet Express ad that Farnsworth starts the episode off with, saying that he paid to have it aired during the Super Bowl, not on the same channel, of course.
And again, a character that's going to come up at least once in this episode. Billy West is also the voice of Zap Brannigan.
Oh, yes. Zap Brannigan, which is Billy West just trying to do his broadest William Shatner impression.
One of my favorite things was during the pandemic, Billy West, because everything's shut down, there's nothing to do, and Billy West reading tweets made by the president in the Zap Brannigan voice, which amazingly works very well.
Yeah. We get a lot of Fry backstory in Series Has Landed, and weirdly, a lot of Bender's backstory too. I had forgotten how much of Bender's backstory you get in this episode.
We get a little bit of in the first episode. Bender is a
Bender. He's a bending robot.
Yeah. And that's all he's ever done, that's his programming. And when we first meet him, he finds out that he no longer wants to keep functioning, because he finally finds out what what he's been bending these rods for. And they are for let's just say self-termination machines.
Yeah, unalive booths. The annoying little YouTube euphemisms we have to dance around sometimes. But Fry accidentally goes into one in that first episode thinking that it's just a phone booth, and Bender's like, hey, let's go for a twofer, and that's how they become friends. But Bender and Fry are immediately connected in that first episode because they are both characters who want to break out of their quote-unquote programming. Bender literally, he wants to do something other than what he was programmed to do, and Fry wants to do something other than what society has deemed is his function. And so they form a really good connection there.
Yeah, and it's through Fry's motivation that Bender is basically able to not necessarily break his programming, but apply his programming to other things. Like, they bend the bars of a grate so they can escape, all and stuff like that. But Bender's also not exactly a great guy. He drinks, he smokes, he steals.
Yeah, and I love that they, in the early episodes, and I wonder how, it comes up again in episode 3, so they had to have been thinking a little bit ahead, but Bender's drinking is kind of at first presented from Fry's viewpoint as like, he's drinking. And then we discovered that that's how robots function, is that they're fueled off of alcohol. So if he does not drink, he starts to lose function and he becomes what we would consider the stereotypical drunk. But I like what we get of Bender's backstory in this. I had forgotten it was this episode, Sirius Has Landed, where they give his full name. Where he says,
Bending's
Bending is my middle name. And Fry's like, what? He's like, yeah, Bender Bending Rodriguez. Because Bender is actually Mexican. We do find that out very, very quickly. He was constructed in a factory in Mexico. So he is actually a Mexican robot. And very proud of his heritage. There are several episodes which go into Bender's, Latino heritage, which is kind of cool.
And of course, we eventually meet his brother Flexo, but we will not be talking about Flexo in this episode.
Yeah. But we also get, as far as Bender's backstory, the setup of the fact that magnets placed on his head make him sing folk songs because it takes away his inhibition circuit is, switched off. And we get a very sad moment where Fry makes a joke about him singing folk songs, and he was like, yes, a robot would have to be crazy to want to sing folk songs. And that, which seems like a throwaway line in this episode, later comes back as a major plot point. I love how many future episodes are set up in these like early couple of episodes with seemingly throwaway lines. This episode is about Fry's first mission on the Planet Express crew. Well, basically all of their first mission as the delivery team, and they're delivering to the moon, which by the year 3000 is not the far away, unattainable place that Fry dreamt of it being in the 1990s. It's now the happiest place orbiting Earth. Luna Park.
Again, this is pre-Disney Fox, so them making fun of Disneyland. A lot of Fox animated shows made fun of Disney.
Yeah. Fox used to have a very contentious relationship with Disney, and then now they're owned by Disney. So, be careful who you mock, I guess, is the thing for that. Anyway, we learn a lot about the backstory we get set up for the backstory of Dr. Zoidberg, who is the doctor who is not really versed in human biology. So why is he working at this basically all human company? We find that out several seasons later of exactly how Dr. Zoidberg ended up here. And
yeah, in the first episode, it's already established that the delivery service is just a front to pay for Professor Farnsworth's experiments, because in his heart, he is an inventor, but his research requires funding, and so he already owns a spaceship, so he decides to use the spaceship to do a cargo delivery service to fund his research.
Yeah, and also in this episode, we get a lot of the background of Amy Wong. Like we find out that she is Amy Wong of the Mars Wongs. They're not as rich as everybody says, even though she did go to the sorority Kappa Kappa Wong.
Yeah, she's established as the intern in this episode, working her way through college.
Yeah, but Professor Farnsworth very quickly tells everybody else that even though she's not a very good intern and she's very klutzy, he keeps her around because he and Amy have the same rare blood type. Another thing which comes up later in the series.
If anything happens to Amy, bring back the blood.
Yes. We don't find out as much about Hermie's backstory in this. And what we know about Leela's backstory is given in the pilot, which is that she is the only known alien of her kind.
And she grew up in an orphanage.
And she grew up in an orphanage. Yeah, alien.
Alien. Alien, yeah, she's an alien.
We won't be talking about the episode where they find out about Leela's backstory, but she's not an alien. She's a human. She's just a mutated human. And in the year 3000, human mutants have to stay in the sewers. And since she looked almost normal, because the only distinguishing feature about her is that she has one eye instead of two, her parents sent her above ground and faked that she was an orphaned alien, and left her in an orphanage and have been secretly watching her from the sewers her entire life. But the plot of this episode is, Fry finally gets to go to the moon, and he discovers that none of the people in the year 3000 see the moon as this amazing romantic far off dream, because it's literally like a 3-second flight from Earth, And there's a goofy, park that's built there, that you just go there for the kitschy park and then you leave. But Fry wants to see the real moon. He wants to be like the Apollo astronauts. He wants to be like Neil Armstrong and all those other people you can't remember.
Yeah, we find out that Fry's dream when he was a kid was to be an astronaut. He just did not have the grades for it or the physical dexterity for it, and he would puke when he would get on roller coasters and such. So it's like physically and mentally he could never be an astronaut, but he'd always dreamed of being one. And it's one of the reasons why he loves being in the future, because he kind of gets to live that dream, even though he's still a delivery boy.
Yeah, I feel you on that, Fry. That was my dream as a little kid too. I really wanted to be an astronaut, but when I was a little kid, you had to join the military and do all that kind of stuff. And I was never that physically capable, nor did I care to be. Grades, I probably could have done it, but yeah, physically, I would have never gotten through the astronaut training that was required when we were kids. Now, of course, both of us are too poor to just give Jeff Bezos like a gazillion dollars and take a ride into space, but that hadn't come about yet.
We can always freeze you for 1,000 years.
You know what? I'm down. But Fry gets really annoyed with how little people in the year 3000 actually know about the history of the moon exploration. They have the educational thing, which is, they accidentally think that it's Ralph Cramden, bang, zoom, straight to the moon. He was a visionary. And he, Fry has to be like, he wasn't a visionary, he was a TV comedian, and that to the moon thing was just a bad joke about doing horrible things to his wife. So
It is very, it is the Disney-fied, again, making fun of Disney, how Disney homogenizes, if you ever go to the Disney parks and you go to, Main Street USA or any of their Americana sections of the park, how they have a homogenized version of history.
hey,
So
I
this is,
don't see you with a fungineering degree. I love that they do call them fungineers. They do have Moon Street USA.
mhm. I mean, instead of the Country Bear Jamboree, we get the Goofy Gopher Review.
Brought to you by Monsanto. Please direct all complaints to the Monsanto Corporation. Some of these jokes only get more pointed and depressing with time, just gotta say. I do like that the if you are the sort of person who has played Outer Worlds, the video game, you will be like, hey, did they rip off their little moon mascot from this episode? Because those two look almost exactly the same. And yes, I realize that they're both referencing the trip to the moon, but it is a little like, huh.
I
Hopefully,
did,
it's an intentional reference.
I did like that. I mean, you know, the ending of that movie is the rocket ship getting into the moon's eye, and then Bender just throwing the beer bottle into the
Yeah,
moon man's eyes.
yeah. We also get, and of course we got some of it in the pilot, but we also realized that the alienese script is going to be a thing in most episodes now. There is a sign written in alienese which reads tasty human burgers for this particular episode. But if you never realized that, if you've watched Futurama and you never realized that, you can actually read the alien script that shows up in this. It's really just a 1-to-1 cipher for English, kind of like Aurebesh is for Star Wars. There are actually multiple alien scripts for Futurama. I think there are 3. I can't remember if that's accurate, but there's definitely more than one. And but the main one is just really fascinating to learn. I can't always read it immediately. It usually takes my brain a couple of seconds, but I've gotten pretty good at the alienese over the years.
But yeah, this whole episode is, Fry wants the real moon experience. And like you said, the moon is just a tourist attraction to the people in the year 3000.
To the point that they have lost the original moon landing site. Like, nobody knows or cares where it is. Like, they know at some point in the past humans landed on the moon, but why would you care about the boring historical stuff? People come here for the silly amusement park. That's the only interesting thing about the moon.
We're
Yeah.
whalers on the moon. We carry our harpoons.
But there ain't no whale, so we tell tall tales and sing a whaling tune. I sing that song all the freaking time, just driving around town and stuff.
That is the ultimate Disney reference, and the reference, the Pirates of the Caribbean reference.
Yeah, except, of course, this being the year 3000, we realized that all of the animatronics in these things are actually sentient beings. They're just robots with a job at all. Because at one point, when they're going through it, one of them goes, "Hey, Bender," and he goes, "Oh, I went to school with that guy," like, and you realize, like, they're not just animatronics; they're actually fully sentient beings, and this is just their 9 to 5. Which I love, and again, a thing that carries forth through the series.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Fry and Leela end up on the actual moon, and they're running out of oxygen because the moon ride only gives you can wear a spacesuit, you get oxygen, you're actually outside on the actual surface of the moon.
But you only had to be there for 3 or 4 minutes, and then Fry's just like, "Let's go off track. I want to see the real moon," and then they very quickly start running out of oxygen.
Yeah, because they're only given enough oxygen for the ride.
Yeah. Love that when they're running out of oxygen and they're trying to figure out what to do, and Leela's like, "Well, we're boned," they discover that there's a hydroponic farm with its own dome and atmosphere not far from where they end up, and they go in there, and this is the first introduction of another thing that will show up constantly in the series, which are the bugalo, which are these giant ladybugs kind of creatures that are the size of cows and are treated like cows. And in fact, one of the biggest bugalo farms, it belongs to Amy's family on Mars. But they show up first in this episode because Fry and Leela get told that if they want to earn their oxygen, they have to go milk the animals. They're not given the specific name bugalo at this point, but they are, in fact, bugalo.
Yeah, not the first time, but not the last time we see a space hillbilly.
But yeah, space hillbillies are not. But I do like that this farmer just says you've got to stay away from his 3 robot daughters: Lulu Bell 7, Daisy May 28K, and the Crushinator.
But I just love that his hat says the moon will rise again, which again, double meaning in that, yes, moon rise, but this also implies there was a moon civil war.
Yeah, he's some part of the Moon Confederacy, I guess. Coming from the deep south, that always made me laugh. That joke, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, I see where you're going with this.
But yeah, and throughout of it, for the plot, Amy is given the keys to the ship by Leela because Amy is handling the crate lift to deliver their cargo, which are stuffed animals for the claw machines. And she accidentally drops the keys into the crate of stuffed animals, and now she has to work the claw machine
to
get the keys back because the owner of the park is a lazy SOB by his own admittance.
Yeah. The thing is that, you talked about the memes, but the bit with the claw machine gives us one of the early Futurama memes, which was the one I quoted at the beginning of the episode, which is Bender tries to stick his arm into the claw machine to grab the keys, and he's caught with his arm in the claw machine and gets kicked out of the park. And he says, well, okay, I'll go make my own amusement park with blackjack and hookers. In fact, forget the amusement park. And later on, he tells Fry a similar thing. I'll go do my own thing with blackjack and hookers. In fact, forget the blackjack. Like.
But yeah, as Fry and Leela are working their way to get the oxygen, here comes Bender, and Bender has wooed one of the robot daughters.
Don't tell me he went for the Crushinator.
A fine lady like that needs to be romanced.
Yeah.
But Papa, I love him.
The hilarious thing is this would not be the last time we saw the Crushinator either. She comes back in other episodes. I don't think the rest of her family even does. But the Crushinator appears in other episodes, which is funny. But, they have to run again, and just in the course of their fleeing from the farmer and the Crushinator, they end up finding the original moon landing site. They originally, they find the original Apollo moonlander, and they at least Fry and Leela hide inside of it to escape the dropping temperatures as they enter the dark side of the moon.
I wonder if at this point they would not have the funding for Pink Floyd.
Well, no, but they do reference Dark Side of the Moon. They don't play anything, but as the shadow starts falling, Fry does go Dark Side of the Moon, which is great. But this does have one of my favorite sight gags in this episode, which is that when they get inside the lander and they're hiding out in there and having their deep, long conversation, there is a little plaque behind Leela that says, "This lander returned to this spot by the Historical Stickler Society," which I love. But this does, I believe, really start the kind of there are hints of it in the first thing that Fry might be a little attracted to Leela, but this kind of sets up the basis for their entire romance, which is Fry, she gets mad and she kind of snaps at Fry and she's like, "Look around you, it's just rocks. It's boring. There's nothing here except for the kitschy amusement park. I don't know why you wanted to come out here, and now we're gonna die." And Fry has like a really good speech of like, every night as a kid I would look up and the moon was this far off, unattainable thing. And I just wanted you to see it through my eyes. And as he like dips his head sad and kind of waits for death, there is that reflection of the moon and the beautiful Earthrise behind, over the horizon and stuff. And it's this really gorgeous piece of animation and all that Leela sees reflected in the glass of Fry's helmet. And then she goes like, "Oh, it really is beautiful. I do see it through your eyes now."
The beginning of a very long will they, won't they relationship.
Yeah. We'll get back to that.
The first 2 seasons, it's very much will they, won't they.
Yeah.
Because Fry gets together with a couple of other women. Leela gets a couple of, male partners. So yeah.
But, and I think there's at least one woman in there for Leela. But the thing is that they do end up getting rescued by Amy, who has now learned how to work a claw machine so well that she won all of the stuffed animals that they originally delivered and the keys.
Yeah, amazingly, now she can fly the ship.
Well, and that's what Leela says is, how did she learn to fly the ship? And then you discover that, like, part of the ship's controls looks a lot like the claw machine controls. And, she picks up Bender and the lander with a magnet, and Bender, sings folk songs,
I'll kill you, Amy. Oh, wait, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And if you listen over the credits, that's when the song gets really good because he starts adding new verses, which is, like, you know, that he'll take out all the humans in the world and all that kind of stuff. It's like,
Hey there, baby, you want to kill all humans? That's a different
yeah.
episode, but point still stands.
But yeah, the thing is that there is a Bender folk song that I actually do sing a lot that's from a different episode, which is his version of Jimmy Crack Corn.
Jimmy Crack Corn and Bender is great. Take that,
Yeah,
you stupid corn.
yeah, it's like Jimmy Crack Corn and I don't care, Jimmy Crack Corn and I still don't care, Bender Crack Corn and he is great. Take that, you stupid corn. Yeah, I do love that. But that that is kind of where the series proper begins of this idea of like here's this weird guy from the 90s who always wanted to be an astronaut and now he is. And that brings us into the next episode we want to talk about, which comes from the third season. So we've skipped all the way from the second episode ever of the series to the fourth episode of the third season, still in the Fox era. And it is called The Luck of the Fryish.
Yeah, and in this episode, we get a lot of flashbacks to Fry's life in the 80s and 90s, growing up. How his parents, his mother was very distant. She cared more about sports and listening to sports on the radio, watching sports on TV than she did raising her own children. Fry's father, old soldier, and is constantly preparing for doomsday. Then we get Fry's older brother, Yancey, voiced by Tom Kenny, SpongeBob himself.
Yeah. Futurama is just an amazing collection of the greatest voice actors in history. We discover that Yancey and Philip, the Fry that we follow in the main series, Yancey was always trying to take things from his younger brother. He was jealous, we see that from the moment he's born and they decide to call him Philip and Yancey goes, "No, I want my name to be Philip." You know. And then they give him a toy and Yancey immediately takes it away and goes, "No, my toy." Like, okay, he steals Fry's basketball moves. He steals Fry's
Dance
breakdancing
move,
moves.
yeah.
Yeah. And part of this is that when they're a kid when they're kids playing basketball, I think they're supposed to be like, I don't know, I think Fry is supposed to be like 12 or something at this point. He finds a 7-leaf clover and it starts to give him a little bit of luck. He can dunk the basketball better. He can do breakdancing moves nobody else can do. And Yancey notices it and keeps saying, like, give me the clover, give me the clover, to the point where Fry has to hide his 7-leaf clover. And from that point on, he kind of becomes a loser. And Fry always, we catch up with Fry in the future, in the normal year 3000 of the show. And he is saying, like, if only I had my 7-leaf clover, maybe I wouldn't be in the position I'm in. Maybe I would have done great things. I would have been a great astronaut. I wouldn't have gotten frozen and sent to the future. And so they go to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, they go to old New York, the old New York buried under the city in the sewer system. In the series, we find out about old New York and how there are a lot of mutants down there. If you're a fan of the Fallout series, the humans that were around during the alien wars were mutated, and two of them were Leto's parents. As we find out in this episode, one of Fry's neighbors, still alive in the future, but as a mutant.
Yeah. But they are able to find Fry's house in the the ruins, and they are able to go to his hiding place, and the 7-leaf clover is missing, and Fry says, "Oh, great, Yancey must have found it, at some point and stole it." And then they come across, as they're leaving, they come across a statue of what looks like Yancey, and he's got the 7-leaf clover on his lapel, and it says, "Philip J. Fry, the first person on Mars." And Fry's like, "Great, after I disappeared, back in 1999, he must have stolen my name, stolen my 7-leaf clover, and stolen my ambition to be an astronaut." And I kind of want to say something about Yancey here, which is that despite how the episode ends, I do not like Yancey. I think that Yancey was basically a horrible person.
He definitely is. Again, as someone who has a brother, especially someone who has a younger brother, I'm not going to lie, I was a bit of a Yancey. I'm not going to lie. Sorry, little brother. But yeah, so I kind of get it. But, Yancey, throughout the episode, they make Yancey out to be the biggest douchebag in the world. Like I said, stealing all of Philip's stuff, stealing his dance moves, stealing his basketball moves, stealing everything that he could from his little brother. So it makes sense to Fry that his brother would steal basically his life.
Yeah, and I mean, we do see, you can kind of forgive Yancey when he's like really tiny, and you see like, oh, Philip is just being born, and he's like a 3-year-old or whatever, and he's like, "No, I want my name to be Philip. No, give me that toy." Because that's just like, that's every toddler. Every toddler goes through that phase.
Especially when you're no longer the only child.
Yeah, but even like, I mean, I was an only child, and I definitely went through that phase. Like, go over to, a cousin's house or a friend from preschool or something, and it's constantly just like, "No, I want that. I want to do this. I'm better than you at that," And you kind of remain that way. I think a lot of kids do up until they hit like middle school. And then you kind of start to realize, like, I have to get along with other kids. Like, I can't just like run in and take whatever I want. At least if you don't have garbage parents, that's kind of what you start to learn, But we see Yancey do this to Fry well into their adulthood.
To be fair, Yancey and Philip do have garbage parents.
Yeah, just the absolute worst. But the thing is it's shown over and over in the series that Philip Fry is he's an idiot. He's a bit of a, I don't know what the word for, a not buff himbo is, but Fry is kind of that. He's just a little adorkable dude, and he's not very smart, but his personality, his kindness, his heart, his generosity are huge. And it's proven over and over again in the series that is like the main thing Fry has. He doesn't have brains, but he has heart and empathy and generosity and just kindness oozing out his pores.
It's what attracts Leela to him.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, Fry's a good dude. He's just an idiot.
Yeah, he's just, and not even, I hate to say the word idiot, but it's just that he's not educated. He's not, and he's not very witty. He's the one that, somebody will insult him and he'll go like, "No, I'm isn't," which is an actual Fry quote that I love, is him trying to think of a comeback to somebody insulting him and being like, "No, I'm isn't." And that's just the way Fry's brain works. He's not very quick. and he's not very educated. But he is just like the best guy. And Yancey, on the other hand, takes after their father, Yancey Sr., who is just an absolute garbage person. So I know that the series tries to, like, they try to soften all of Fry's family at various points, and this episode kind of starts it. But I don't know. I'm kind of not giving Yancey much credit, because it's like, I don't think he would have changed as a person if his brother had not disappeared. But that brings us back to the year 3000, where they're looking up about Philip J. Fry, the first person on Mars, and all of the, historical documents talk about, I love how they talk about the Philip J. Fry who went to Mars, because it's like, he won the lottery and became a multimillionaire. And then he ended up becoming, like, even richer, because he bought a house with his lottery winnings, and in the basement of the house accidentally struck oil.
And then he became a rock star.
And then he went on, like, a trip around the world and ended up running into some rockers, and they became like a rock band. And
Like,
he ended up dating a supermodel.
It's every, it's, for lack of a better term, it's every teenage boy's fantasy. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to have a big house. I'm going to have a hot girlfriend, and then I'm going to be a rock star, and then I'm going to be a spaceman, so stuff like that. And so it's like every dream that Philip Fry in the year 3000 has ever wanted, in his eyes, was stolen by Yancey.
Yeah. Because he's watching all this footage of Yancey doing this while wearing the 7-leaf clover. His rock band is even called Leaf 7. It's like everything is all, he talks about, like, oh, I couldn't have done it without my lucky 7-leaf clover, and it just makes Fry madder and madder as he's watching this. And then they discover that he's buried in the World Heroes section of Orbiting Meadows National Cemetery, which is the closest you'll ever get to heaven. And it's just this asteroid that's been turned into a cemetery. And I love that they show up on there, and they're just walking in with, like, Bender carrying several shovels. And then Bender just, like, peels off and is like, well, nobody can say that I don't own John Larroquette's spine now. It's like, or
I'm one skull short of a Musketeer reunion.
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite thing, is when Bender just peels off to, like, go find the skull of some Mouseketeer that he doesn't already have in his collection, which I find funny. But it does, knowing what I know about the series now, every time I watch that, I'm like, why wouldn't the Musketeers have ended up as heads in jars? At least, like, Annette.
Maybe. Annette probably be the only one. Everyone else, like, Disney left them high and dry and poor and destitute. And yeah, we've talked enough about those depressing stories on this podcast.
Yeah. But this is the point, speaking of depressing stories, where the story turns from angry Fry into sad and depressed Fry, because as they're trying to dig up the grave to get the 7-leaf clover, Fry knocks some moss off of the gravestone, and it turns out that the inscription reads, "Here lies Philip J. Fry, named for his uncle, to carry on his spirit." And then you get the flashback that shows Yancey having a son with his wife, and his son he says, "I want to name him Philip after my brother who I miss every day." And then he gives him the 7-leaf clover, and that's kind of, we discover that it's not Yancey, it's Yancey's son, and Yancey loved his brother enough to name his child after him and give him the clover and all of this amazing stuff.
Yeah, in baby Philip's room is a drawing done by Fry of him on a rocket ship. So that little Philip grew up with that picture in his room.
Except, no, he didn't, because if you look, the joke is, it says, drawn by Philip J. Fry, age 20.
What I mean is Yancey's son, Philip,
Oh,
grew up
yeah,
with that.
Yancey's son, Philip. Okay, yeah, but I've always liked that joke, is that it looks over, it's like this, like, crayon stick figure drawing of, like, me, moon, rocket, and then it says, like, drawn by Philip J. Fry, age 20. And I'm thinking, like, me in my 40s, that's probably what it would look like. In fact, during COVID, when I couldn't leave the house, I actually drew my father a birthday card during COVID and all, and it was like me and like drawing little stick figures of like my family and my dog and stuff in that kind of childish style, which my artwork is not much better than that, even if I tried. And then I signed it like Kiki age, and then whatever age I was at the time.
Better than AI art.
Yeah, no, I would still, like, listen out there. If you're using any sort of generative AI to make flyers or whatever, I will come to your business 3 times more if you just give a crayon to a random 5-year-old and have them draw literally any picture for your business or your event or what have you. If I see you using generative AI to create one of those really ugly flyers that people are putting out now, I will not come to your business or your event or your whatever. Literally just give a 5-year-old some candy and some crayons and have them draw you anything, and it will get you more business than an AI flyer. I guarantee you.
It's this not the first and definitely not the last Fry-centered episode that will tug at your heartstrings. I suggested a different episode, but Kiki said no because we don't want to talk about a dead dog.
Yeah. There is one episode of Futurama. Well, there are like 2 episodes of Futurama that I always skip in a rewatch. And one of them is that episode, and the other one is the episode about female Bender, which has it basically immediately aged like milk the second that episode came out. It was never a good episode, and it's even worse today. So yeah, those 2 episodes, one I can't stand because of the horrible quote unquote humor of it, and one I can't stand because I have a heart and empathy and I love animals. So justice for Seymour is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I do like, the use of music in that episode because, Fry hides the Clover in his vinyl copy, his record of the Breakfast Club soundtrack. And Yancey finds it while looking for music to play at his upcoming wedding.
And he specifically, this is another reason why I hate Yancey. He pulls it out and goes, the Breakfast Club soundtrack. Wow, that'll clear the room at the end of the night. And you know what? Screw you, Yancey. That is a banger soundtrack. It's going to be a banger soundtrack in the year 3000. Shut up.
It is probably the second best use of Don't You Forget About Me other than the Breakfast Club.
Yeah. This is even a better use than Pitch Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. It's only now that, and we're actually recording this, that I've realized how many Fry-centered episodes we're using on this in our Futurama episode, because we are going straight into season 4, episode 1, Roswell That Ends Well. One of many time travel episodes of Futurama.
And also another episode about Fry's family history. This is a lot of people's, maybe not favorite episode, but it's definitely in their top 10. It's definitely in my top 10. And it is, what if the famous Roswell, New Mexico, 1947 alien crash was actually the Planet Express crew being sent back in time? With Zoidberg being the alien they find, which is a hilarious sequence.
So yeah, how did it end up back in time? Well, the Planet Express crew are watching a sun go supernova, and none of them has ever seen a exploding star before. So they want to get a close-up viewing of this star going supernova.
Front row seat.
Fry makes some popcorn to enjoy the viewing, and he throws it into the microwave, and the microwave goes off at the same time that the sun is going supernova. Solar waves meet microwaves equal time travel.
What smells blue? Which is another line I use all the time in daily life. But Fry's a little bit different because when he gets to the past, he's like, oh, my grandfather Enos was here. You know, he was serving in New Mexico at the time in the army. So I'll go and talk to him and everything. And they're like, no, you know, the butterfly effect. You might, you know, step on a butterfly and kill your own grandfather and then you'd never be born and whatever.
Back to the Future rules.
Yeah, Back to the Future rules. And so Fry's kind of whole thing is he wants to see his grandfather, and his grandfather is basically
Gomer Pyle.
Yeah, his grandfather is basically Gomer Pyle. Is kind of, and they play up that joke pretty hardcore. They even have, you know, he's got the Gomer voice and, you know, the well, shucks, Sarge, and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Well, for our younger listeners, Gomer Pyle.
No, go Google it. We're not getting into that. But the thing is that then you've got Bender's body kind of fell apart in the crash of the Planet Express ship, and so the army found the crashed remains of Bender, and they've formed him into like a little UFO, and his head was the only thing that remained with the Planet Express crew. So Fry is carrying around Bender's head as he goes on his adventures. Zoidberg gets separated and caught by the military, and he becomes the alien they're trying to autopsy while he's still alive, which leads to one of my favorite jokes of stomach contents, one deviled egg, and then Zoidberg goes, ooh, a deviled egg, and eats it. Stomach contents, the same deviled egg.
You know, I mentioned Back to the Future, and it's very Back to the Future-y. Because Fry tries to protect his grandfather. After Professor Farnsworth kind of gets you, hey, if anything happens to your grandfather, you'll never be born. Realizing that he's on a military base, hey, anything could harm him. So he tries to protect his grandfather at all times. But every time he tries to protect his grandfather from supposed certain doom, he actually puts him in even more danger.
Yeah, up to the point where he finally decides to find a house out in the middle of nowhere in the desert where he can hide his grandfather. And then it turns out that that's the house you see in all those nuclear test videos that gets exploded.
Yeah, but we're kind of getting ahead because I want to talk a little bit about the truth about Enos, because Enos takes Fry into a diner where we meet his girlfriend,
Mildred,
who is the waitress, and, you know, they're going to get married soon, but he makes the remark, don't you sometimes feel that you marry women because you have to and not because you want to, which doesn't make Fry very happy.
Yeah, and it's not that Fry is ever seen to be a bigot. A lot of people misread this scene. It's just that Fry is like, no, you have to marry her and have children with her because that's where I come from. You know, it's very much a self-preservation. Fry is never seen to be really bigoted in the rest of the show. So a lot of people take this as like a gay panic joke or whatever. It's not. It's just that he's like, no, you specifically, Enos, need to marry her, specifically Mildred, and have children so that my family line can come about and I can exist, you know.
But, yeah, like you said, Enos goes kaboom, and Fry panics because, okay, Back to the Future rules apply. He's changed history. He's going to cease to exist. But he doesn't cease to exist.
Yeah, and he immediately takes that as, well, wait a minute, maybe Grandma Mildred had gotten somewhere else because Enos couldn't have been my grandfather if I'm still alive.
Maybe that was another Enos Fry. Maybe this is a different Mildred.
Yeah, maybe we've got the wrong people. Also, Grandma Mildred is really, really hot. So, much like a Back to the Future Rules, where dude sees a younger version of one of his ancestors and goes like, "Yowza," until he realizes who she is. Fry is immediately attracted to Mildred, and once he kind of figures out, like, well, wait, if I haven't disappeared, then that means Enos was never, and that means you're not my grandmother, so, whatever happens, it's all good.
And she's like all in. Like Enos hasn't even been dead 24 hours and she is ripping her dress open and wanting to, and wanting Fry to, give it to her.
Yeah, I mean, she's wanting to make the beast with a billion backs, as they would say later in the series. And they do. It is very obvious that when the Planet Express crew finds Fry the next morning, they have done the do. The do has been did. And Fry's like, no, I figured it all out. There's no way she can be my grandmother. And it leads to a great joke of Farnsworth saying, of course she's your grandmother. And then it turns around and she's like now wearing like old lady clothes and being like, what did you say, dearie? So they immediately begin to rag on Fry for doing it with his own grandmother.
And yeah, Fry becomes Mr. I'm my own grandpa.
And not through any circuitous weird so-and-so married this person and they married that person. And so, like, by a technical definition.
Many, many years ago when I was 23, I was married to a widow. We all know the song.
Yeah. And if you don't know the song, go listen to the song. It's kind of funny the way the family chart works out. But that song is, of course, just that through the weird convenience of who married who at what time and all that kind of stuff, that you end up in technicality being your own grandfather. Fry is very literally his own grandfather, as in direct DNA.
And I'm surprised how often this comes back.
This is one of the main linchpins of the show.
Like, we mentioned Nibbler. That's a big thing right there.
Yeah, that is, just to kind of rip that Band-Aid off, it's Nibbler is the one who was there in 1999, along with Fry, different time travel episode. And that is why Fry was chosen to be sent into the future, is because of the weird quirk that happens to his brain because of him being his own genetic grandfather. Since he is the only person in the universe to have successfully done this, he is uniquely qualified to defeat a, universe-ending enemy that shows up during the course of the series.
And throughout the episode, Leela and Professor Farnsworth are doing everything they can to not alter history.
And to blend in, which they don't know how to do.
The only person from the past they know is Fry, so they start talking like Fry.
Yeah, they start, Leela starts using 90s slang and stuff like that, and then, they both order food that is, way too, the professor wants several different kinds of Soylent, Soylent Green with a side of Soylent Yellow, and then when he's reminded, like, no, this is like the 1940s, he just starts ordering like weird fancy food that a little diner in New Mexico would not have, croque monsieur with, a side of the, and so it's very obvious, they don't realize that microwave ovens aren't everywhere yet. I can't remember if they were invented after 1947 or if they had been invented, but they just weren't like
commercially available.
Yeah, I think it might have just been like we had harnessed microwave radiation at that point, but I don't think it was a commercial use product yet.
Yeah, because they need a microwave because they need microwaves to go through the wormhole. That's how they time traveled the first time. That's going to be how they time travel the second time. So now that Fry has completely screwed up history, they said, screw it. Screw history. We're just going to take what we need. And the military base has a microwave satellite that is good enough.
They realized that the army has Zoidberg in containment, and they're like, well, since history is all screwed up anyway because of Fry, it doesn't matter if we just send Leela in, with a ray gun and bust Zoidberg out.
Yeah. We do get some mentions of Area 51 that they plan on moving the alien to Area 51. We get a conspiracy theorist photographer who is really, really bad at his job. And we see the origins of various conspiracy theory photographs.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that there is a joke in here that is played off as a joke, and I think the writers may have meant it as a joke, because I don't think the actual story was declassified until after this episode was made. I may be wrong on that, but they make the joke of, no, we have to hide Zoidberg as an alien, and the army people say the only people that will have access are the president, the general, the doctor on base, and one conspiracy nut who nobody will ever believe. Okay, so if you know the story of Roswell, which I do really, really well because I spent part of my teens being a real conspiracy freak. What I found out later, though, because like I said, I don't think that these records had been declassified until fairly recently, within the last few years. But what you can find out now about the Roswell story is that joke about the army just going and that one guy who will make look crazy is actually really what happened. In order to hide what happened at Roswell, which I do not think was anything alien, I think it was just what Nellis Air Force Base and Area 51 has always been used for, which is testing out, new experimental weaponry. But in order to hide what they were doing, when that incident happened, the government did, in fact, feed conspiracy theories to one lone guy in Roswell that was part of the civilian group that found the original materials from the Air Force Base, and started being yeah, no, I'm actually a guy that works in the Air Force Base. And they started sending this guy basically kind of deep throat type messages that was yeah, you have no idea how far this rabbit hole goes. Yeah, the government's hiding everything from everyone, and ended up driving this guy crazy and ruining his life as a way to the crazier that guy looked, the more plausible the Air Force denial of well, see, the only people that believe it are this one nutter in Roswell, And it turns out the guy wasn't lying. He was telling people what he thought was reality that had been fed to him by a misinformation campaign from the government. And I love that Futurama has this throwaway joke about the military bringing in one crazy conspiracy nut so that they have plausible deniability. And I don't think that was actually the known story when this episode was written. It becomes my favorite joke from this episode now, years after it aired, because I'm crap, did they actually know about that when they wrote this episode?
The episode ends here with, as they are about to activate the microwave satellite and go through the wormhole, Bender's head falls out of the ship, but they can't go back and get it because the wormhole is closing. And this starts a running gag of Bender being stuck in the past. So much so that it became a Simpsons episode.
Yeah. Bender ends up having to take the long way, as they would put it in Doctor Who. And yeah, he ends up buried in the ground for 1,000 years until the Planet Express crew gets back to their normal time.
I don't know if it was intentional, but it's very reminiscent of another sci-fi robot, Marvin the Paranoid Android, that due to time travel shenanigans, Marvin is technically older than the universe itself.
Yeah.
So because of time travel shenanigans, Bender is technically older than the universe itself by several thousand years.
Yeah. It is a really wonderful kind of nod to the sci-fi that went before it. The one thing we haven't said that if you know anything about this show, you tend to know is that the writer's room of this show is maybe the most overeducated group of people ever. There are like several people with advanced degrees. I think there are like at least 3 PhDs that were on the writing staff. Like most of the writing staff went to like Harvard or Yale or MIT. It's really like these are people that you would not expect to find in like comedy cartoon writer room, but they're all there. And this ends up being one of the most insanely detailed and scientifically accurate shows, which we will get to in the next episode we're going to talk about. We are leaving behind the Fox seasons, and we're going to move on to an episode that for the Comedy Central portion of the run.
Yeah, and we are going all the way to the end of the Comedy Central run. The final episode. For 10 years, this was the final episode of the series. Meanwhile,
another time travel episode.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned this before, that the entire series has had this big will they, won't they between Fry and Leela. And there have been episodes where they have come close to being together. There have been episodes that imply that they will never be together. Fry has had multiple partners. Leela has had multiple partners. But by the end of the Fox run, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, there is the big implication that yes, they are together or they will get together.
Yeah, it's very much at the end of Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, it's very much, Leela's final line. She delivers the final line in both of these quote unquote finales. And her final line of the Fox run was, I want to see how it ends, which gave you the hope that she was beginning to fall for Fry and that eventually they would end up together. They had to keep the will they won't they going a little bit in the Comedy Central version, but they keep coming very close and at one point even start properly dating during this run. And so in this episode, they start out in the same place as we started the podcast, on the moon at Luna Park, and they're there just to have like a fun day. And Fry mentions to Leela, this is the first kind of trip we went on together, was coming to this park.
Yeah, their first mission. And in these ensuing years, Lunar Park has kind of become dilapidated.
Yeah. Craterface is showing some wear. He's now making balloon animals, and Fry says, can you make a balloon animal of Leela? And he does, and it's very complicated. And, they go on this ride, and Bender ends up getting sick and throwing up nuts and bolts out of his inner workings. And those end up breaking the ride, which sends Leela flying through the dome out into space. And then the hole is sealed because Craterface and his huge head, the moon-faced mascot that we talked about before, Craterface gets sucked out as part of the depressurization and ends up blocking the hole and saving the rest of the, only Leela gets sucked out into space. But they find, again, we're bringing it back, a stuffed bugalo that Fry had given to Leela earlier in their exploration of the park. Yeah, their little date they have. And Fry they are all sure Leela is dead because they didn't find Leela, but they found this stuffed bugalo toy. And then it turns out that Leela had crawled inside the plushie and used the air from the balloon animal of herself to breathe while she was trapped in space for the few minutes it took them to find the bungalow. And I love that Leela says, she gave her life to save mine. It's just, Katie Seagal does the best reading of that.
Yeah. But this moment where he almost loses Leela is the point where he says he doesn't want to spend his life without Leela. He's going to ask Leela to marry him.
Yeah, he says that to Bender. He's like, no, I really need to, I cannot live the rest of my life if Leela is not going to be in my life, and I need to go ahead and, after all this time, finally ask her to marry me. We have not mentioned the thing that at the time made Futurama unique. It's a little more, King of the Hill is doing it now with the reboot, and a couple of other shows have kind of done it. But when we talked about The Simpsons, we talked about how they have that floating timeline, that it's just The Simpsons are always the same age, and as the series has lasted and lasted, it means that, Homer is no longer born in 1950 whatever to be elementary age children in the early, mid 80s. He now has to be somebody who was a teenager in the 90s and, after the show aired and everything, and that Bart and Lisa are always the same age and Maggie never grows up and, all that kind of stuff. Futurama from the beginning was the exact opposite of that. Futurama was Matt Groening being like, okay, I want a series where continuity is absolutely king. Time moves at a 1-to-1 year-to-year pace. And so every new season, they would mention that, it started in the year 3000, and then the next season is set in the year 3001, and the season after that is, and whenever they would have these time skips, they would then be like, oh, the series came back in, 2013 or whatever. Well, now it's 3013 in the timeline of the show. They are going 1-to-1. So as we have a year in the real world, Futurama goes forward by a year.
There was an election episode in the previous season that they called Decision 3012.
Yeah. And so in this episode, which aired in 2013, they were going as if 13 years had passed for Fry and Leela. And in fact, she mentions it at one point in the episode where she says, after 13 years of on again, off again, or whatever.
13 years of on again, off again, Fry finally asked a question.
Yeah. So let's get to the time travel shenanigans.
Yeah. So Professor Farnsworth has created a time button, a mini time machine that can send one person backwards in time 10 seconds.
Well, actually, that one person, I love the way that they have this working, because this is a little bit more scientifically weird than just one person goes back 10 seconds in time. He specifically states that the person holding the button inside the bubble of the button actually stays put in the time stream, and the entirety of the rest of the universe jumps back 10 seconds, which comes up later in the episode in how we end up in the mess we end up in. So I have to point out that scientifically, the writer's room sat down and were like, okay, how is this going to work in order to get all our characters in the situation we need to get them into?
Yeah. And they do make a reference like, well, couldn't you just press the button a bunch of times and go back as early as you want? But no, because the battery needs 10 seconds to recharge. So you couldn't be able to do that, which does play into the rest of the episode. To show off this new device, the professor creates kind of a hut that kind of exists outside of time. So the rest of the crew can look in there as they pick on Zoidberg, which is just a running gag in the entire series.
I love when they humiliate Zoidberg and Bender goes, again!
There is one drawback, as the professor says, that if you are in a time shelter when the button is pressed and you come out of it, you will be ripped from existence because time itself will not know where to put you because technically you exist outside of time during that 10 seconds.
Yeah. So you have to be careful that, if somebody is using the button, like with Farnsworth humiliating Zoidberg over and over every 10 seconds, the others cannot leave the shelter during that time, because if they are outside the time stream and then suddenly are in the time stream when the button gets pressed, then the machine doesn't know where exactly they should be in the previous 10 seconds, because technically they weren't anywhere as the flow of time considered it. So, yeah.
So Fry steals the button and just has shenanigans with it as he's trying to find the perfect diamond to give Leela as he proposes to her.
I love that he ends up basically scamming a diamond dealer over and over again to collect a whole bunch of diamonds, and then has a different jeweler put the diamonds together into a giant engagement ring. That thing's got to be like the size of like a tennis ball or something. It's huge.
Yeah. And going to a fancy restaurant.
It's Elzar's. Sorry, we got to mention Elzar. It's the only episode we're doing that Elzar appears in. Elzar and his Spice Weasel. Bam. Yeah. He shows up in a lot of episodes.
Yeah, it's parody of Emerald Lagasse.
Yeah.
It's amazing how this one character kind of outlasts the popularity of the character they're parodying.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not saying that Emerald Lagasse is not a thing at time of recording, but he definitely has hit a waning moment from his peak popularity when they created Elzar. But anyway, Elzar runs the fanciest restaurant in New York, and that's where Fry goes to propose to Leela, because you wanna do it nice for a lady that fine, as Bender would say.
She doesn't know how to answer the question. So he says, "Don't rush. Meet me at the top of the Empire State Building."
The Vampire State Building. It has been rebuilt and renamed by this point.
Yeah, with your answer. If you get there by 6:30, I know the answer is yes. If you don't show up, I know the answer is no, and I'll understand. But yeah, time goes fast. It's already, at this point, Fry's watch now reads, and I'd say specifically, Fry's watch ends up reading after 7 o'clock as he's on the roof of the building. And in his eyes, Leela stood him up. Leela said no. And after 13 years of will they, won't they, her final answer being no, he doesn't want to live. He can't live. He says it earlier in the episode. He cannot continue living without Leela. And if Leela doesn't want him, well, there's no reason for him to keep going. So he jumps.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, because this is another one where the science nerds on the writing crew got really, really into the weeds on this. The Vampire State Building is 240 floors tall. It's the tallest building in New York, and it has like a little bit above that, but the top floor that you can reach as a normal person is floor 240. Okay, so keep that in mind.
So yeah, as he's falling, he sees the giant clock on the side of the building reading 6:23. And he says, wait, if it's 6:23, why does my watch say 7 o'clock? Because I kept pressing the button, my watch kept on going forward in time while everyone else was going back in time 10 seconds. Very Back to the Future in that regard. So yes, Leela is saying yes to him. Leela will marry him, and he's now the happiest person in the world. So he decides to press the button to get him backwards 10 seconds, because in his mind, okay, I've only been falling for a few seconds. I'll press the button and I'll be right back on top of the building. And he's not.
Yeah, and here's where I have to be the science nitpicky one again. Okay? So it would take, according to the height given for that building, it would take someone roughly 25 seconds, given terminal velocity of gravity, to fall from the height that he is all the way to the ground. And if you watch the episode and you kind of count how long he's been, they do every one of those loops happens within 10 seconds.
Because he jumps, he falls for a few seconds, hits a gargoyle, and then keeps falling. And every time he presses the button, he lands right next to that gargoyle falling down.
It's actually from the gargoyle because he steps off the ledge and then he hits the gargoyle and starts to spin out. From the point when he hits the gargoyle, it would take about 25 seconds. Because anytime he hits the button and pops back up, he ends up showing up just below the gargoyle. And if you time it out, it actually works down to basically the second. It's a fascinating episode just from how they had to do the math and the animation. It's not the most detailed that Futurama has ever gotten, because there's a body swap episode where they had to invent an entirely new mathematical formula that they then wrote a scientific paper about and got published. I think that's the most detailed they ever got with the nitpicky science. But this one is a really good thing of like what happens when you get multiple people with PhDs and masters of science and all that in the same room together.
And, the reason Fry stole the button to begin with was not to scam a diamond seller or anything like that. He wanted the one moment of Leela saying, "Yes, I will marry you, Fry," to last forever.
Well, or to last as long as they want, because he tells Janos, the vampire, that he says when she gets here and she says, "Yes, I'm going to use this time button to make the sunset last as long as we want." Which is such a romantic idea. Also, the scamming the diamond seller out of like 150 diamonds is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
But yeah, Farnsworth realizes what's going on. He gets the entire crew into the shelter saying, "Hey, someone stole the button and is using it. We need to go and stop it." And then, Fry stole the button. But yeah. And as Farnsworth and the crew get to the Vampire State Building, Fry has been falling so long that he ends up falling asleep.
Well, it's been a long day, and it was already sunset when he started, so it probably took them a couple of hours at least.
And we don't know how long he's been using that button for. It could have been days.
Well, like I said, it's got to be at least a couple of hours because of, just the time to walk from the Planet Express building in 10-second intervals to that point. And like, we do know, if you're like a real nerd about maps and stuff, we do know where the Planet Express building is versus where you can work it out, I'm sure. But it's probably a matter of a few hours, maybe.
Yeah. And as Fry goes to hit the button one more time after waking up, it slips out of his hands and splat.
And boy, is that a gory, detailed splat. I think it's one of the goriest scenes they've ever shown on Futurama.
They could only get away with it because it was the final episode.
Well, and also animation. And on cable, but, man, I had forgotten how gory that moment is. And the thing is that Leela realizes, like, oh no, if I press the button, I'll save Fry, because it hasn't been 10 seconds, And she does, but the problem is that Farnsworth had left the time shelter, and before he can stop her, she presses the button, and the professor gets shredded into little time ribbons and disappears.
You killed the professor, but I saved Fry!
Yeah, and I love that, like, Leela is like, nobody cares about the professor, Fry, But the problem is that they don't have any way of stopping Fry, so he splats every single time, and when the button is pressed, he can remember.
Because he had the button on him.
Well, no, because when it was pressed, Leela has the button on her. This is the one point in the episode where I'm like, you thought about it so drastically. And then this one thing kind of breaks it for me. I mean, it needs to happen for the plot, and so I'm not like mad at it. But in every other instance, when people have the button goes with them. The button stays with the person pressing it. We see it in every other, even if they move location during the reset, you know?
We also see it earlier in the episode where they're picking on Zoidberg. They take the $10 bill out of Zoidberg's pocket, and it's still in the professor's hand. It's not in Zoidberg's pocket when they reset.
So we know that you can move objects and stuff in that time period, and as long as they're within the time bubble when you press the button, the bubble that it forms, that's like, you know, a foot or so around the user, all of that stuff is safe from the time stream. So the fact that the button keeps appearing in Fry's hand and Leela has to wait for him to fall to the ground and then pick up the button and use it again for this sequence, kind of, I'm like, wait, that's not how the button works. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, he would keep splatting because of that 10-second reset, and she didn't get the button for the first time until after he had hit the ground. So it would still happen the same way, but the fact that the button keeps moving back, I'm like, no, you can have the button in Leela's hand the entire time and still have the same literal impact, you know?
Yeah, but, you know, again, the plot needs to happen. And it's funny. It actually is funnier that the button keeps on coming back to Fry and Fry having, wait, I died. Wait, what's going on? Leela, what's going on?
And the other thing is they have proven that if you're outside the bubble when the time resets, you forget everything that just happened. So the fact that Fry remembers hitting the ground is also another little thing where I'm like, okay, explain that. You know?
Back to the episode here. As Fry keeps splatting and splatting and splatting, they have to stop this. Because if they don't stop this, they'll all be stuck in this 10-second loop forever. So Bender comes up with an idea. I have an airbag in me. I will run out during the next loop. You all run at me as fast as you can. Knock into me. It'll activate the airbag. And then we'll save Fry and end this. Which is a great plan. And you really only have one shot at it.
Yeah, because if they're caught outside on the reset, they're toast.
So that's what they do. Bender jumps out. The other crew carries Zoidberg and ram him right into Bender, activating his airbag. Fry hits the airbag, and he is saved. But the button that is still on Fry's person falls out. But Fry, bouncing off the airbag, crashes and breaks the button, which breaks time.
Yeah, it has been reset so many times that when the button is, you know, crushed by Fry, everything in the universe except for Fry and Leela, who happen to be like right in the radius of the button, everything else gets frozen. And they realize, like, I think we broke the universe. So Fry, after realizing, like, oh, there's no way either of us know how to reset this button, you know, how to fix it, they realize, like, oh, we're just gonna be stuck like this. And as they wander around this completely frozen world, and props to the animators for this, because this is some of the most beautiful and interesting imagery in the entire series. As they go through all these areas and vignettes and stuff of like people frozen at the moment that the button broke, Fry says, well, will you still marry me? And Leela says, yeah, I will.
Even if he wasn't the last man on Earth.
Yeah, even if he wasn't the last man in the universe, even.
Yeah.
But so they end up getting all of their family and friends together in a chapel. They move them from their frozen position, and they get the Space Pope. The Space Pope.
He would have to be already on Earth when this happened.
You know, we don't know exactly how long it took them to pull everybody to the wedding, but I'm guessing that the Space Pope was maybe visiting New York at the time.
They get everybody. They get, all of the Planet Express crew. They get Leela's parents.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody except the professor who is dead.
Yeah. Because, Leela killed him. But as they say, they're really adorable and wonderful. I absolutely love their vows to each other.
Do I, Fry, take you, Leela, to be my wife? You do.
Yeah, it's a really interesting set of vows. But as they're doing that, this like weird glimmer that they call it starts buzzing around their heads, and they're like, "Hey, go away! Leave us alone," and everything. And they were like, "What was that?" And they're like, "I don't know. If it happens again, maybe we'll figure it out." And they decide to start the longest honeymoon in history.
Yep, they go all over Earth. And one of my favorite gags is, towards that end of that montage, is they're on top of the Eiffel Tower, they kiss, and then Leela checks off Eiffel Tower off this long list. I assume it's places where they did it.
Yeah, probably. Or at least visited. But the thing is that because time is frozen, they can walk across oceans and stuff. But the one thing is they can't leave Earth. No vehicles work. They literally have to walk everywhere. So they are stuck on planet Earth. But they do this for decades, and we watch them as they age. It's a great montage of them just enjoying all these places on Earth that they wanted to go as a couple. And the whole time that they're doing it, this glimmer keeps showing up and zipping around them. And finally, when they are very old and they're both walking with canes, they end up climbing back to the top of the Vampire State Building. And Fry said, "Well, let me read you the proposal that I wrote all of that time ago, and we can finally drink the champagne that Janos the vampire waiter had poured for them all those decades early."
Yeah, and as this happens, the professor is alive!
Yeah, it turns out that glimmer was actually the professor tunneling through time, trying to figure out, where everyone was, where Fry and Leela were.
Yeah, it turns out he wasn't killed. He was just sent to an alternate timeline.
Yeah, and the thing is that he says, "Well, now that I found you, we can use the time button to get back." And Fry says, "Well, no, the time button has been broken." And he's got a little like Ziploc baggie in his pocket with all the pieces in it. And the thing is that Farnsworth just completely repairs it, and instead of it having a 10-second thing on it, it can actually send them back to before he invented the time button.
But they won't have any memories of their time together because time will be reset.
Yeah, if Farnsworth presses the button, Fry and Leela will be outside the bubble. It will send everybody back. Farnsworth wasn't there. He'll presumably have the memories of him like tunneling through time or whatever. But Fry and Leela, all of their time together, all of their decades together as a married couple traveling around the world will be completely reset. And it ends on the most beautiful set of lines, maybe in the entire series, where Fry, in this aged state that they're in, turns to Leela and says, "So what do you think? You want to go around again?" And Leela thinks for a moment and says, "I do." And those are the final words of the series before the second cancellation.
10 years later, we're back, baby. The Hulu era begins, and we're not going to talk about the episode, but I did watch it. The first episode of the Hulu era picks up directly where we leave off.
Yeah, it's basically them at the moment after the professor has pressed the time button. It's great.
We go back to that final scene right before the time button was destroyed, and that's it. We pick up the show right where it left off.
Yeah. And I'm going to say I have liked the Hulu seasons, but we're only going to talk about one episode from it because it's an episode that is absolutely insane that this thing exists. And So when we were picking episodes, I said that this had to be the one out of the Hulu series that we talked about. Not because it's necessarily the greatest of the episodes, but because it's the most unlikely episode of Futurama ever made.
I had forgotten this episode had existed. Now, I'm going to be really honest. I have not watched the Hulu era until we did this podcast. So I have not watched the new seasons. So myself, going into the Hulu era was when we decided to finally do Futurama for the podcast. So I had to watch that first episode I had to pick up where we left off.
Yeah. I, on the other hand, have seen every episode of Futurama multiple times and can quote long stretches of it.
So I had forgotten this episode had existed until Kiki reminded me this is the episode we're going to do. And I did rewatch it just to bring it back to my memory. So this goes all the way back to like the Fox era. In that episode,
it's called Kif Gets Knocked Up a Notch.
Yeah, Kif and Amy. Kif, who is Zap Brannigan's punching bag, and Amy have been together for a bit. And, Kif is inviting Amy to live with him on Zap's ship. But Amy isn't ready to settle down yet. She loves Kif. She wants to be with Kif, but she's still young. This is still her in her intern era. She's still a college student at this point. So she's not ready to settle down, but she loves Kif and wants to be with Kif.
Yeah. I do want to point out that this is the first episode of season 4. So this is the opening episode of the final season that we're on Fox that we're talking about. It aired in January of 2003.
So as this is happening, they have their moment. Kif uses the holodeck to give them a nice little date. And Kif is very happy because he gets to be with Amy, and Amy has basically said what I just said. She will marry Kif. She will be with Kif forever when she is ready to settle down. But she's not ready yet. So Kif is very excited. He is very happy. But due to Zap Brannigan shenanigans, he ends up blowing a hole in the side of the ship, and everybody starts getting sucked out. Amy is holding on to Kif, but in the ensuing suckage of space, Kif ends up slipping out of his glove, and he is grabbed by the hand by Leela and saved.
Yeah. Kif always, as a lot of cartoon characters do, he is always seen wearing gloves. But the thing is that it also just seems to be part of his dupe uniform, the Democratic Order of Planets.
Yeah. And we find out why he wears gloves in that episode, because his species procreates by the touching of hands. And when in a high emotional state such as happiness, once two of Kif's species touch hands, they can get pregnant. But because Kif was already in a heightened state of emotion due to being with Amy, when Leela touched his hand, he absorbed some of Leela's DNA and got pregnant.
Well, it's like they always say in health class, no glove, no love.
I love that phrase because, of course, it means something different in modern slang versus what it meant in the show.
Yeah, I mean, and of course that was, if you didn't grow up in the time we did with the sort of weird sex ed PSAs on MTV that we did, no glove, no love might be a reference that you don't get anymore.
Condoms. It means condoms.
It was the big MTV PSA phrase for use condoms and have safer sex and avoid pregnancy and HIV. But the thing is that we discover a lot about the amphibiosin, which is Kif's species. We find out a lot about amphibiosin mating habits in this one, which is that the males carry the young, so they are the ones who get pregnant. So Kif is the one that ends up pregnant, and that the parent who they go through a whole thing of like, well, how did Kif get pregnant? Because it's a very chaotic scene and everything. And eventually they discover that it's actually Leela's DNA that got him pregnant. But Leela is like, no, I don't want to be a mother with Kif. And Kif immediately says, no. The way that my species does it is that it doesn't matter who provides the genetic material, which thank you, Leela, for doing that. But the real parent of the offspring is considered the smizmar, which is the person who caused the receptive feelings of love that can lead an amphibiosin to become pregnant. And so Amy is still the technical mother, even though she's not the genetic mother. And so they do a whole thing of like Amy being like, no, this is too much responsibility for my age, because she's supposed to be, in like her late teens, early 20s. She's a college student at this point. And she's like, no, I still want to have an active social life and go out with my friends and get drunk all the time and, go surf on my party board and all this kind of stuff. And she says, I'm not sure I am ready to be a mother. But then they discover that, again, the way Kif's species has children, Kif gives birth in a swamp. It's a very funny scene. They have the grand midwife. It's hilarious. Go watch it. But the tadpole offspring that Kif births go into a swamp, and they say, no, they won't emerge from the swamp as children for another 20 years. And Amy says, 20 years from now, yeah, I'll probably be grown up enough and ready for maternity by that point. Okay.
Fast forward 20 years.
Well, hold on. I loved it. I love that they set this 20-year time date, because of course, who in the hell thinks this show is still going to be on in the year 2023? This is 2003.
Later that year, the show would be canceled the first time.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally the first episode of their final season. They have probably just barely written this before they officially get the axe. They almost certainly know that it's very probable that they are going to get canceled. Okay, they know by the time of the fourth season starting that they are not really high in the ratings. They are not doing as well as The Simpsons or, even Family Guy that got canceled. And so what they were basically saying is, yeah, we know that you want to know that Kif and Amy will end up together because the fans really liked that pairing. And they were like, just like we're giving you the optimism of Fry and Leela ending up together someday with Devil's Hands or Idle Playthings, this was their episode to be like, look, Kif and Amy are going to be together for a long time. They're going to have children and everything. You'll just never see it.
Kif and Amy are endgame.
Yeah. And then it hits 2023 and the show is still on the air, and somebody remembers, hey, wait a minute. Didn't we say back in 2003 that it would take 20 years for their children to come back?
One of my favorite gags is from the previous episode. After the time button's been reset, it is now, 3023, and Fry has been in the future for 23 years. So they are keeping the time is going forward with Futurama. And I love that.
So that leads us to the episode we're going to finish this podcast episode with, which is the second episode of the Hulu run, where they realize, like, 20 years later. So they have the episode Children of a Lesser Bog, which finally answers the question of whatever happened to those tadpoles Kif gave birth to 20 years ago.
By this point, Kif and Amy are living together. It's been, since this is, 20 years later, we can presume that Amy has graduated college. She's no longer an intern, but she still works at Planet Express. And work with us,
and actually by this point they are technically married in the sense that Kif's species gets married, but it's not like a formal legal declaration. it's more of a social thing. Like, oh, you've lived together, you've declared your love for each other, you've even produced offspring that are out there in the swamp somewhere, you know? And all, but they don't use the term husband and wife because that's not the term his species uses. And it's not a legal declaration. So if the couple ever wants to separate, they don't have to go through a legal divorce. They can just be like, yeah, it was fun. I'm moving out now. Bye. Which seems in some ways a much more sane idea than some of the things we do. So they are, according to Kif's culture at least, they are married at this point.
And yeah, I like how that episode begins, and we get Amy gets an alert on her calendar, and it is in fact dated January 12th, 3003.
Yeah, it is literally the thing, because she leaves herself at the end of that first episode. She leaves herself a note 20 years into the future. Motherhood.
I love how the event is listed as the same day that the episode aired.
Yeah. And I also love that this episode brings back one of the things that was a little contentious in the first episode, which is the iPhones. EYE, because they are implanted in your eye. And throughout this entire episode, everybody in the cast keeps using their iPhones to broadcast images of various things, like Amy's calendar. And then when she gets the alert, they're like, what motherhood? What does this mean? And she's like, oh yeah, remember 20 years ago when Leela had knocked up Kif? And Leela is like, I did what now? How drunk was I? And they replay scenes from that original episode as just like Amy saying like, oh, I got video of the birth.
I love how they put a filter on it just to hide the fact that it's different animation studios who made both episodes.
Well, yeah. And that was, I mean, they were using a mix of, during the Fox era, they used a mix of hand-drawn animation and computer animation during that original run. And by the time that we get to the Hulu series, it is 100% digital animation. And so, yeah, they have to put a little filter on it as if it was like, the kind of like analog VHS kind of idea.
Sidebar, that first episode of the Hulu, because it's 100% digital animation, they actually reanimated that final scene from Meanwhile to match the digital animation, which I did like.
and they had to reanimate the entire opening credit sequence. And if you actually look up the opening credit sequence, there's something like 34 layers of animation or something like that in that sequence. That is a monstrous sequence to animate, which is why they rarely touch it. Like it's not like the Simpsons opening where they have a different couch gag for the episodes. Like there are very few episodes over the run of Futurama where they make any shifts to the opening credits, and they had to redo them entirely for the Hulu run.
I do like how for a split second it says Hulu-rama in the Hulu intro.
Yeah. Now that they're on Hulu, it switches from Futurama to Hulu-rama for just like a few frames.
But yeah, the couch gag for the Futurama intro is always that one clip of public domain animation.
Well, it's the one thing that changes is the subtitle, which we haven't actually talked about, but they are funny. The one for this episode is actually anything happened while we were out, because this was the first proper episode of the run after the reintroduction. So I love that it mirrored the crew being like, okay, we've got to catch up on like 10 years of the timeline being weird.
Yeah.
But there's a B plot with Fry and Bender trying to remake Clump O' Honey, which is one of Fry's previous favorite candies from the year 1999, and it's not made anymore, and he wants to taste it again, and so him and Bender try to come up with it. Bender, over the course of the series, has become a really bad and then really expert chef. So that's kind of the the B plot, but it doesn't intersect with this until like the very end. So we'll forget about that because it doesn't really matter.
Throughout the series, there have been new characters introduced, children of characters introduced. In season 3, we're introduced to Dwight Conrad, Hermes' son. And then later on, we're introduced to Professor Farnworth's clone/son, Hubert. And now we have Kith and Amy's children, Axel, Mandy, and Newt.
Yeah, I like the way that we get these three though, because we go back to the swamp from the original episode. We meet up with the Grand Midwife again, who is maybe one of my favorite side characters in all of Futurama history.
Tress MacNeille back again as the Grand Midwife.
Yeah, Tress MacNeille, who we've talked about before, her most common character on Futurama is Mom, the woman who owns the robot company that made Bender and all the other robots we see, Mom's Friendly Robot Company. But for this one, she's the Grand Midwife. She does a lot of like side character voices, but Mom is her most common one.
And she played the Grand Midwife in that original episode as well, so to bring her back and play the character again.
Yeah. The thing is that they get there, and when you watch that original episode, Kif births hundreds of tadpoles. And the first challenge is they have to get from where Kif births them several feet down into the safety of the swamp water. And
very turtle-like.
Yeah, and Leela has to... what's so funny is I actually live in a portion of the country where sea turtles have their hatching grounds. And so every year there are groups of volunteers that actually go down to the beach and have been taught how to basically protect and help these sea turtle hatchlings get into the ocean where they can start to grow. Because that, just like this, that is the most dangerous time, is when they come out of their eggs and make their way down to the water. And so
Lots of predators,
because sea turtles became so heavily endangered for a while, there are now in my area, and there are even people who come from all over the country and all over the world to participate. There are now people who go through special training and then go during hatching season and sit on the beaches at night near known hatching grounds for the turtles and actually like guard and protect any hatchlings so that the turtle population could be boosted, because it got so close to extinction there for a while.
Yeah, and in that original episode, you see both mothers protecting the children, Amy and Leela.
Yeah, Amy and Leela come up and they form a badass duo. And as Leela says, hey, girls got to protect their DNA. And we do see hundreds of tadpoles actually successfully make it to the water. Some of them are, eaten by various predators.
One of my favorite things is in the final bit of that original episode, we see one tadpole with one eye.
Yeah, we are reminded that they are Leela's genetic offspring. And that'll come back up in this episode. But the thing is that when they start to hatch, Amy is kind of like, you see all of these like hundreds of shapes start moving in the water, and the Grand Midwife says, and now is the time for the winnowing. And Amy goes, what does that mean? And Kif says, it means don't start naming them yet. And then what follows is an absolute bloodbath of just hundreds of these offspring being taken by various predators, including Zoidberg, who's just like, oh, are we having a bloodbath? I'll join in. Apparently, Kif's species is very tasty and goes with butter and lemon, according to Zoidberg.
Wouldn't be the first bloodbath that Zoidberg would be in, just ask Fry.
Yeah. Bum 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 bum. The thing is, though, is that after the winnowing, only 3 of the babies
Well,
Or
4 first.
well,
4.
4 at first, and then it cuts away and you hear like a chop, and they're like 3.5. But at the end of it all, out of these hundreds of tadpoles that Kif birthed, only 3 of them make it to shore. And apparently this is pretty standard for his species. The grand midwife is like, oh, yay, 3 of them have survived. You know, you have a feeling that like sometimes parents will wait 20 years and then like none of their offspring survive. Which is kind of awful. But the thing is that there are 2 boys. There is Axel, like you said, and he looks like an emo teenager.
Voiced by Maurice LaMarche.
Yeah. And then you have Mandy, who is the only girl.
Voiced by
And
Lauren Tom.
yeah. And then you have Newt, who is the baby who has one eye, just like Mommy Leela.
Why did it not have her voiced by Katie Seagal?
It's a boy, but yeah.
But he is also voiced by Lauren Tom. So having Maurice LaMarche and Lauren Tom voice their children, I like that. But yeah, part of me was like, one of them should have been voiced by Katie.
Well, the thing is I think that the reason why is that we've seen episodes over the course of the series where Katie Skull, who is a goddess, and I will hear nothing against, so this is not meant as a slight. She tried to do like Leela as a kid, Leela as a teenager and stuff, and it all kind of comes across as a woman Katie Seagal's age doing that voice. Whereas Lauren Tom is a professional voice actress who does many character voices across many different types of shows. And she also does a lot of little kid voices.
Like we mentioned, she did Connie when she was a kid. Ever so changing slightly for the adult Connie in the new King of the Hill.
Yeah. And so I think it's just that I don't think, Katie Seagal is not a voice actress solely. She does voice acting, but, she is not used to doing character voices in that way. And that is a very particular skill, and some people have trained in it and some people haven't. And I'm not going to fault her for not being able to do it, but I think that that's probably why. Is I think that anytime we've ever heard her try to do like young Leela or whatever, it doesn't kind of come across in that way. It comes across as Leela trying to sound young rather than Leela at a younger age. So, but I do like that they come that Hermes has the question we're all immediately thinking of when the children emerge, is because one of them looks like a teenager, one of them looks like maybe 8 or 9, and one of them is a toddler who can barely speak. And it's Hermes is like, I do have one question. They are all 3 different ages. Question mark. Which I do love the way Hermes forms questions. Good job, Hermes. You are correct.
But Kip says that they all came from different parts of the bog. Little Newt, because he was in the coldest part of the bog, the center, his development was very slow. Mandy, because she was kind of in the between parts of the bog, a little warm, not too cold, she advances, to the child stage. And Axel, because Axel was in the very warm, shallow end of the bog, looks older.
Yeah. And I love that Kif actually says, because Axel sounds like Kif at a teenage. Yeah, like if we had seen a flashback with Kif as a teenager, this would have been the voice Maurice LaMarche would have used. So when you're listening to Axel speak, it sounds like Kif just as an emo teenager, which I love. And Kif immediately says he comes from the hot, shallow waters, just like his old man. So I like that this is the one that is closest in development to the way Kif developed.
Yeah. Adding to the emo is he does have the emo hair, which probably comes from Leela's DNA, because he seems to be the only one with hair.
Yeah, he's the only one with hair, which I like, and that is probably Leela's influence. Yeah,
Like of all of that species, he's the only one with hair.
yeah. Amphibiosins are generally bald as a species. Yeah, both males and females. So
But I gotta say, both Maurice LaMarche and Lauren Tom voicing their children, they both do it. They do a good job in this episode.
yeah, and all three of these children are very, very different in personality, which sometimes when you get a kid character, they aren't really, their only personality is child. Just like we talked about before about like how back when we were growing up, you'd have like the character whose only personality was girl or Asian or, whatever. It was just like you'd have like the one character where it's like, throw them in for diversity. And then they have no other, thing. A lot of times when you add children to a series that is filled with adults and then you add children later, they really are just like kid. But I like that every kid in this series that has been added to the cast has a different personality. They are all extremely different characters.
Like it would have been easy to make every kid just a younger version of their parent, and they don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, Cubert is very, very different from Professor Farnsworth and from Fry, who he also shares, genetics with. And Dwight is neither Hermes nor his mother LaBarbara. Like, he has a very different personality. He has parts of their personalities. You can see that they're his parents in his personality, but he is very different than both of them. And in that same way, Axel and Newt and Mandy are all very different from each other and from their parents. And after this episode, they have become just a regular part of the Hulu series. And there are episodes after this that feature and even center around this family.
And I like that. I mean, I'm going to have to keep on watching the show just to,
Yeah.
keep up.
I'm
But
trying not to like really spoil anything from the Hulu series other than kind of like these first two episodes, because I do want people to go watch it if they were like, oh, I watched the old stuff, but I haven't kept up with the Hulu shows or anything. Like, go watch the Hulu shows. It's for the most part the same team of creatives. I mean, there's been some changeover in some writers and whatever, but for the most part, it's the same team of creatives. It's all the same voice cast. It's all the. So, really worth watching. Just to finish off this episode, though, there is a quirk of amphibiosin legal stuff where if one of the parents is not genetically related to the children, there is an automatic challenge of parental rights.
and Amy is very, very angry when she hears this because in her mind, Leela is challenging for parentage.
Yeah, and the grand midwife who also oversees the challenge, she has to tell Amy, like, no, Leela did not know about this challenge either. This is an automatic legal challenge that comes if the DNA provided for the pregnancy is different than the smizmar that caused the feelings of the pregnancy. Because what they want to do is they want to make sure that the smizmar will consider these their actual offspring, even though they're not genetically related.
Through the episode, Amy is, again, first time mother and starting up with 3 kids. She's exhausted. She is overwhelmed and she just needs a break.
I think whether you have kids or not, the thought of going from 0 kids to a teenager, an 8-year-old, and a toddler all at once, and then Kif is called away on his duties on, Zap's spaceship, and immediately, because it's a military posting, he has to leave. He can't choose to stay. And so Amy is suddenly now a single mother in practice on a day-to-day basis with an emo teenager, an 8-year-old. and a toddler and no knowledge of motherhood beyond like a week ago, you know?
Yeah. So, Auntie Leela takes care of the kids while mommy Amy just gets a nap because mama needs a nap.
Yeah. Reminder that mama needs a nap.
Yeah.
Let mama nap, okay? It's the
But,
greatest thing you can do for your mom. Let her nap.
but, she seeing how the kids act around Leela, she believes that the kids are forming more of an emotional attachment to Leela because she is their biological mother.
Yeah, and there's even jokes at first when the kids come home that Newt keeps wandering up to Leela and going, "Mama," and she's like, "Well, not quite." Yeah.
Well, Newt has one eye and Leela has one
Yeah,
eye.
I mean, it's the thing of like it's very obvious that the kids know that like yes, Leela is biological mom, but not like everyday mom. You know?
They even start calling her Mama Leela.
Yeah. And Amy does get jealous because she's in her exhausted state. She's like, well, maybe the kids love you more because you're biologically related to them. And she feels like she's going to get displaced as the mother. And then all of a sudden, the grand midwife shows up and is like, you have to, you're being legally challenged for the parentage of your children and you could lose them. And Amy has a total breakdown, as is her right, But to settle this very quickly, Amy ends up, you know, Amy and Kif go through this challenge and they're led into a hut and the grand midwife is like, "Oh, this challenge is going to be so difficult and so long. You will have to go through many trials." And then she says, "First off, Amy, do you love these children as much as if they were your own biological children?" And Amy starts to cry and she says, "I love them more than anything I ever thought I could love." And the grand midwife says, "And thus the challenge is concluded." It really is that simple. They just want to know that Amy is emotionally bonded to these children, even though they are not from her genetic material. And, it all works out in the end and they become a cute little family, but I do like that they did bring up these ideas of like jealousy in a blended family and what happens if they are like with adopted kids or maybe kids who are born through surrogacy and stuff. And I'm not saying it's like a deep philosophical negotiation of the complex feelings behind that, but I do like that they at least bring up that sometimes there are complicated emotions, but it doesn't make families who go through adoption or surrogacy or anything like that any less of a true family and have any less love.
I mean, it's very obvious that the children love Amy as their mother. They even say, "You're the greatest mommy in the world" at the end of the episode.
Yeah. I do like that at one point when Amy is feeling her most exhausted, she tells Kif, "I am the worst mother in the universe, except of course for my mother," because her mother is not a great mother.
If you pause it and look at her and her itinerary, it's like call dad about mom, call mom about mom.
Yeah. But yeah, I did want to talk about this episode to, I didn't really want to spoil a bunch of the stuff about the Hulu run because I knew that a lot of the old fans had not kept up with it, which I kind of think is sad,
You know,
Like,
guilty as charged.
yeah, and I understand if you haven't. I'm not being judgmental of you or anybody else who hasn't, but I really like that they're keeping this long-term continuity. They're keeping these characters. They've kept all of the voice cast. They've kept, and so it really does feel like a proper continuation of the original show. And I did want to point that out and just also point out that this is maybe one of the most unlikely episodes of television ever in.
Like, you make a point. Who's going to remember 20 years later? oh yeah, we said this one-off line in this episode. We got to come back to it.
Yeah, because you had even forgotten about that episode. Like, you had forgotten entirely that there was an episode where Kif got pregnant and, it's set up that him and Amy were parents.
Yeah.
And I did like when I saw this come up in the trailer for the first Hulu season. I think this was the thing that got the really hardcore addicted fans the most excited, because it was like, oh my goodness, you're right. It has been 20 years.
Yeah, and much like Hermes' son and Dr. Farnsworth's clone son, how these kid characters are not forgotten, that they become regular members of the cast, and there are episodes about them. Who would have thought, watching those first 4 seasons, we're going to get episodes about Hermes and Dr. Farnsworth's children having their own Awesome Express business, No one would have thought,
Yeah.
if you had seen the original series, you would have seen the original 4-season run on Fox. You would never figured that out. Are Leela and Fry next?
I kind of hope not, just because I don't think that that's really appropriate for their relationship, because we saw in Meanwhile that they chose never to have kids during all those decades that they were together, and they were alone. I mean, there were literally no other people, and if it's like, well, if they're going to have a family, wouldn't they have had it in that circumstance, like just to have other people to talk to?
I think it's a situation is they don't want to ask the question of what happened to the kid when time was restored. They didn't even want to.
Well, yeah, I mean,
consider
I
that.
know, but the thing is that Leela even jokes about it in that episode when, there's something that happens, and she tells Fry, like, boy, it's a good thing that we did not have children. So they even joke about it at the end of the episode. And the thing is that we have discussed whether or not Leela wants kids in the context of the show. There was an episode where she and one of her previous partners thought about adopting a child. And I think that if they ever had a child, Leela would want to adopt because she grew up in an orphanarium, And so I'm also not sure that Fry wants the genetic weirdness of passing on his DNA other than he already has, as seen in Roswell That Ends Well.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting that I think that if Fry and Leela ever decided to become parents, I think it would probably be an adoption situation, and I kind of hope that that's the way they would go.
Yeah, me too. Because Leela would seem like the kind of person who would want to it, or at least a foster child.
Yeah, and also she's already passed on her DNA technically, so she wouldn't feel like, oh, I have to pass on my DNA for posterity. Fry has also passed on his DNA
To himself.
to himself, but also weirdly to his father, to his brother, to his nephew, and all the way down to Professor Farnsworth and Cubert. They are all a product of his DNA. And so I think that would kind of make Fry less likely to be like, no, I want biological children, if Leela was like, hey, let's adopt a kid,
Yeah.
So if they ever do that, I hope that they go the adoption route for them. I'm not against them becoming parents. I just think that would be what Leela would choose. And I think Fry would just want Leela to be happy. I think that Fry would like to be a father. He just wouldn't care where the kid came from.
Just imagining Fry as a dad. Lord help that child. I think that's a good place to end it. We don't even need to ask the question because Futurama absolutely has the magic.
Yeah, and there are mixed reviews of the Hulu seasons. Some fans really like it. Some fans are like, oh, it just doesn't have the same spark as the old episode, which is, fans will do that in any new iteration of any program. I still like the the Hulu episodes. I'm still having fun with at least the first 2 seasons. You know, we are recording this before the newest season comes out. But I've heard good things and I'm hoping good things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to make time and actually get through the Hulu era, because I've been enjoying what I've been watching of the few episodes I have seen of the Hulu era, and yeah, I want to see more. Yeah, and if you, dear listener, are a old school Futurama fan, I do recommend catching up on the Hulu episodes. They are very good.
And if you, for some reason, have made it through this entire episode and you've never seen a single episode of Futurama, please go watch it. I mean, it's all there. It's all very easily accessible.
The only thing that it does, you know, bother my brain is that what is considered the seasons on like Wikipedia and various fan sites is not what is listed as the seasons on like Hulu and Disney Plus.
Yeah. But, you know, okay. There's some numbering quirks, but we ran into that a lot with Doctor Who, and, you know, so we're used to it.
Numbering quirk somehow makes sense with Futurama.
Yeah, and Doctor Who. So anyway,
this is the part where we really talk about what we're going to do next week, and we are going to be taking a little break from the podcast for a few weeks to we're going to have a bigger announcement later in the week, but just know that big things are coming to the podcast very soon. It's going to take us a little time to get everything together. So we're going to be taking the rest of the month off, and we'll be back in September. So we're going to try to keep the socials active during this time, and stuff is coming up very soon. Hopefully by the time this episode is launched, we'll get some new social medias. I have been working on a TikTok for a bit for the podcast. I'm going to hopefully get that set up and finished by the time this episode is released. Editor Tuesday cutting in here. TikTok is up and ready at Rewatching the Magic. For those of you on TikTok, check it out. So we will be back in a few weeks. We are going to hopefully come back first week of September with some brand new stuff. Keep an eye on the socials, and we'll make the big announcement of what the first episode of September is going to be. So for right now, thank all of you for listening to us all these years. It's been almost 7 years we've been doing this podcast, and we thank each and every one of you for sticking through us, whether you've been here for the entire 7 years or just recently joined us. But
yeah. And we shall return.
The magic will continue. It's just we need a break to set up a lot of things. So, as I always say on this podcast, we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. See you in September, meatbags.
All right! I'm a delivery boy!
Start it up, cause I've got a job to do. My day begins at 1:45 the crack of noon, and then soon I'll bring you all sorts of stuff to chew. Never thought I'd have this kind of job at 42. Work where? Well, I don't want to be rude. Drop the name of my job and I might be sued. But to be fair, I guess I'll spare you a simple name clue. The German word for over and what you do to food. Anyway, that's to say the name's weirdly kind of true. But it doesn't matter, cause this platter is just for you. Order on the app, take a nap, it'll arrive soon. You could go yourself instead, I'm waiting in the drive-thru. Finish up, then I'll bring these treats to you. Rack of ribs or a sausage pizza too. Then I'm out, more deliveries I gotta do. No scenarios, cause this is not a porn shoot. Delivering all these foes on a peak, just so I can bring you all you can eat. When you see me zooming down your street, you know I'm delivering something savory or sweet. Order up all the food you enjoy, with long subs or a tub of bok choy. Bringing it to you if you're in Illinois. It's my job,
I'm a delivery boy!
For for your order. I'm a Jedi Master. No one else will ever bring it to you faster. Brought it to your door, please be sure to tip me after. I'm the one who drove 20 minutes for your pasta. Speaking of, take a minute, think this over. Why order ice cream any month after October? I don't really mind the time to be your meal chauffeur, but it wouldn't melt if it came from somewhere closer. In the mood for some food that's so delicious? Don't want to cook yourself or have to do the dishes? Baby, I can bring it no matter what your wish is, just as long as you remember to update your address. I'm serious, I'm not being rhetorical, cause when I'm walking with your meal down to your corridor to your apartment, delivering your order, you call me minutes later just to say that you're in Florida. Delivering all these flows on my feet, just so I can bring you all you can eat. When you see me zooming down your street, you know I'm delivering something savory or sweet. Order up all the food you enjoy, for long subs or a tub of bok choy. Bringing it to you if you're in Illinois. It's my job.
I'm a delivery boy!
That's not to say this job is super easy, that the whole rigmarole is so light and breezy. Sometimes it leaves me feeling kinda queasy, and not just because all the food is super greasy. Like when I'm trying to locate your address, and the GPS has got me stressed. Going south on North Street, then East Street, heading west, saying make a U-turn when I should just turn left. Inanimate object got me feeling so hostile. I gotta say it drives me crazy, something awful. I wish it had a neck so I could strangle it and throttle when it mispronounces Chipotle as Chipotle. Never mind all the time I'm spending in my whip, having to backtrack because it didn't give me your chips. So I get back in my car and I take another trip just to get your whole meal while you give me half a tip. Delivering all these flows on the beat, just so I can bring you all you can eat. When you see me zooming down your street, you know I'm delivering something savory or sweet. Order up all the food you enjoy, for long subs or a tub of bok choy. Bringing it to you if you're in Illinois. It's my job.
I'm a delivery boy! Alright! I'm a delivery boy!
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
TikTok at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social.
And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.